We're getting close to a world where AI is starting to filter out your cold outreach before a human even sees it. And people are using AI to do mass cold outreach at the moment, which means there is low trust in the market and people's inboxes are getting absolutely slammed and overloaded with people doing cold outreach. Now, in 2025, only 5% of people are actually doing this strategy to help them get 4x the amount of responses compared to everyone else. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how you can get 4x the amount of responses when you're doing cold outreach for lead generation. So with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so at what point do we get to in 2026 where everyone is using AI to go and do cold outreach and lead generation? They're using the same strategies as everyone else, they're using the same copy as everyone else, and then they're launching the campaigns, and then someone on the other end who is receiving the cold outreach is now starting to use AI to go and filter out all of the cold outreach because they don't want the noise in their inbox and they don't want to keep getting bombarded and slammed with people using cold outreach. So at what point do we get to where this is starting to happen? And it's starting to happen now. There's lots of platforms that are doing this. So if we just use cold email, for example, there's tools that basically plug into your email and then it blocks out messages and emails that look like cold outreach. So it's becoming harder and harder to actually cut through the noise and get through to a real human. So there is research that actually backs this up in terms of how you can get 4 times more responses when you're doing cold outreach, and it basically means you've just got to use 3 or more channels. So Omnisend did some research about this where they basically analyze what gets more responses when doing cold outreach, and if you're using 3 or more channels to go and do cold outreach, so for example, you might be using email and then you might be following up with prospects on LinkedIn, and then you might be actually sending a Loom video, like a short 2 to 3 minute Loom video introducing yourself. You are going to get 4 times more responses than someone who is just using cold email to go and do outreach. And at the moment, as it stands, only 5% of people are actually doing this right now because, it's complicated to get set up and you don't really know the right strategy and what to do. And, it's just not the normal thing to do. And that's why if you do things that are hard and people don't do, then you are going to get 4 times the more responses. And I remember if I just explain a story. So I remember when I applied for a job years and years ago, and I had to send my CV on email. And I remember there was like 50 or 75 applicants or however many applicants it was. I remember looking at it being like, Jesus, they're never even going to see my email, let alone read my CV and, go and potentially have an interview. So what I did is I sent my CV and then I basically found the CEO of the company and I just sent him a connection request. And in the note on the connection request on LinkedIn, I basically just said, thanks for the opportunity for reviewing my CV. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, Ben. And basically he accepted my connection request and responded to me on the same day and said, thanks for your message. What we'll do is actually get you in for an interview. The marketing manager will reach out, and then I ended up going for the interview. So I actually went and cut through the noise, and because I followed up on a different channel, and this is what I think is going to happen in 2026. So if you're using 3 or more channels, you're going to be able to build trust a lot faster. So if you just think about it, like if you're up against someone who's just using email and you're using, email, you're following up on LinkedIn, and then you might be using X to actually go and follow up with people, then you are going to get 4 times more responses. And not only that, they're going to be able to actually see that you're a real human, and you're going to be able to build a bit more trust. Because if you think about it, that person who's just using cold email, you're just like a sort of a faceless person. You're a bit of a ghost, especially if the person's not clicked a link, they've not gone over to your social profiles. But if you actually follow up on LinkedIn and X, they can see you're a real human and you're going to build a bit more trust. So this is why it gets more responses. And if you think about it logically, like you are going to get more chances for the prospect to go and respond if you're reaching out to them on different channels and different verticals. So, someone actually may, if you're reaching out to a tech founder, for example, they're probably always on X, for example. So if you reach out on X and say, hey, I was actually reaching out, just following up, I reached out to you on email, but this is the reason why I was reaching out, they're probably likely to see that if they're not all over their email and LinkedIn. So that's why you get more responses. And this could work for any sort of service or business that you're in. If you're following up on channels where your clients are likely to be hanging out, you are going to get 4 times more responses. And in short, just like the story when I was applying for a job, it cuts through the noise far quicker because you are going to be up against people who are just using one form of outreach. But I respond to cold outreach all the time, where if someone's reached out to me on email and then they've reached out to me on LinkedIn as well, I'm way more likely to trust them because I can see that they're a real person on LinkedIn, etc. So the idea is like, you're looking human, you're sounding human, you're building trust, and you're cutting through the noise. So the old way, which people are relying on still, is basically just using email. For just as an example, they're using cold email to go and drive people to Calendly and get people booked in, or they're just relying on LinkedIn to go and drive people to actually go and book a call. But if you think about your business, what you could be doing in 2026 is multi-channel. So you could be using, for example, LinkedIn, and then you could be following up with prospects on email, and then you could be actually using Loom videos to actually go and introduce yourself and send a very quick video. That is going to get you 4 times the amount of responses. You can obviously use different channels. This is just one example, but that is going to get you 4 times the amount of responses and replies, and then probably 4 times the amount of bookings compared to if you're just using email, for example. So just think about like what channels your current clients or prospects actually hang out on. So the main problems, and this is where I was going with this, is like if we just look at cold email, for example, in the B2B space, Belkin's did some research where they analyzed around 16.5 million emails, and they tracked it back all the way from 2019, and the reply rate in 2019 was crazy. It was 8.5%. And now that's dropping every single year, and in 2025, this year, it's now 5%, and then it's predicted to be 4% by the end of 2026. So the solution there is actually to go and diversify and not just rely on cold email, for example. And I'm sure the statistics are very similar, where we look at, Instagram DMs used to go crazy. Like people used to use that as a strategy. When I used to do business development for a different agency, we used to use Instagram outreach and it used to crush. Now the responses are terrible on Instagram compared to what they were years and years ago. So if you're actually following up on different channels, this is going to help you with your cold outreach and actually getting responses. And it goes without saying, a lot of people, when they're doing cold outreach, especially in my world that I'm in, they're using AI slop, and it's just AI slop is now becoming like the default. So a prime example is if you're just pulling information from someone's LinkedIn profile, so you're using a tool like Clay or some data enrichment platform where you're reaching out to a CEO and you're pulling his recent posts and you're saying, hey, John, I love your recent post on LinkedIn about X, Y, and Z. Can you imagine in 2026 with everyone else who's using AI, they're all pulling that same information, speaking about his last post, and you're just going to be put into this bucket of people it's becoming the default of actually doing cold outreach. So what's going to happen is AI is going to start to detect it's now starting to detect with 90% accuracy that your posts have been written by AI. So there's tools now that are actually going to start to filter out your shitty outreach, basically. And you're not going to cut through the noise, and you're not even going to be seen by the human on the other end, because you're going to be looking like everyone else. And that is going to be starting to come the default. And it's the same with like looking at a company's LinkedIn employees. Like, hey, John, notice you have 52 employees. Well, anyway, this is why I'm reaching out. Let's have a call. Like, you're just going to sound like everyone else. It's so obvious that people are just pulling this information that's just not relevant. It's like, skip that and just get to the point. And then it's the same, like, hey, I noticed you live near Manchester, I love the cafe near blah, blah, blah. Like, I know this, it looks like a good strategy, but when everyone else is starting to use this in 2026, it's just going to look like AI slop. So on the flip side, AI slop is good, I think, because it helps you stand out. And now when I work with clients, I make sure that we actually do cold outreach that makes you stand out and actually builds rapport and trust before you even ask them to have a sales call, before you even have a sales call. So this is actually a good thing, because if you're not just relying on AI and these fancy tools and this new sort of thing that you should be doing every single week to go and get leads that everyone else and the gurus have told you to go and do, then you are actually going to go and stand out. So I think it's a good thing. And so we've got the AI gatekeepers that are rising. So you've got like specific tools that are actually going to, filter out the cold outreach. So how to sort of bypass that, what I've looked at in terms of the research is you've got to be doing outreach that is completely unique to you. So you've got like different experiences, you've got different like company case studies, you've got different, you want to be signaling that, you're an actual real human and it's completely relevant to who you're reaching out to. So you're showing like real proof, real numbers, something that an AI literally cannot make up. Like an AI can't make up like a unique case study or something that a client's just said to you or whatever it may be. Like AI can't do that unless you feed it that information. So that's how you sort of that's how you're going to be able to bypass the AI gatekeepers. And there is more. So if we just look at cold email, for example, because it's the easiest to explain, like large lists now are getting punished. So gone are the days in 2019 where you could get 8.5% reply rate by just filtering, 10,000 leads and putting them into a sequence and then, set and forget, and you just have meetings booked in your calendar. You've got large lists that are actually getting punished, and small lists with higher relevance are actually performing a lot better. So obviously, under 50 people in a list, that's getting around a 5.8% reply rate, but over 1,000 is getting around under a 2% reply rate. So you've just got to choose, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to send 5,000 emails and get a 1.9% or 1.8% reply rate, or do you want to have a small segmented list of highly relevant people that are actually relevant to your offer that you might get like a 5 to 10% positive reply rate, and get people booked in? So what I've said here is like segmentation beats volume. So you just want to, like, let's say you've got a group of 1,000 people in a list. Now, how can you actually go and group those people into 10 lists of 100 people, so they're all very specific? So when you do your cold outreach, that the message that you reach out to them is completely relevant and it doesn't look like spam. And then there is statistics as well. So again, if we just look at cold email, for example, long sequences are getting punished. So they're getting flagged. So what I mean by that is, like, instead of just having one email and then there's like 8 follow-up series, so you wait 3 days and then you send another email 3 days later, another email 3 days later, you do that 8 times. That's what you like used to be sort of best practice when you're doing like cold email outreach. But now what the statistics are saying is if you just have 2 emails, that is better, not only for deliverability, because you're telling the email, so you're not telling the email provider, like, no one's even replying after like 7 emails, but it stops the whole sort of, this is a spam email. So you send one email and then do one follow-up, and then you actually go over to a different channel, for example, and hit them on, LinkedIn, for example, or you hit them on X or Instagram or whatever it may be, or you might send them a Loom video. So this is where I'm sort of tying this in with, like, if you use 3 or more channels, that's going to help you get more responses. So overall, the solutions are use different channels, be human. So actually, that being human is actually going to build trust because everyone's using AI. Show unique proof in terms of different experiences and proof that you've had with your business and your clients, etc. Target specific groups, so make sure it's completely relevant, targeting a very segmented audience, and then use short follow-ups and actually do this on multiple different channels. So I'm going to go through how that might actually work. So a very, very simple example would be use 2 different channels. So this would be a sort of beginner level. So you might use email, and then if you don't get any responses after those first 2 emails, then you might go and connect with the prospect on LinkedIn, try and start a conversation there to then get them booked in. That would be the easiest start for most people. Now, the second approach would be something like this. So you've got 2 channels, and then you would add a personalized video in here. So just like I showed you up here, where you might have like LinkedIn and email plus a Loom video, this is how the actual flow would work. So you've got 2 different channels, plus you're adding a personalized video in there. So you might start with LinkedIn, you go and connect with the prospect. So you haven't actually messaged someone at this point, you're just connecting. You send them a message, and then in that message or the follow-up message, you might actually include a Loom video or a personalized landing page, whatever it may be. Again, I've done videos on how to actually go and structure this in more detail, go and check them out. And then if they don't respond after the follow-up message on LinkedIn, that's when you could start introducing email. So if they haven't responded, you could actually go and follow up with the prospect on email and then follow up with them again. And then you could, go move on to another channel or move on and don't contact them for a couple of months and then go through the cycle again. This is how I see it's going to be working more in 2026. And again, you could just do the reverse of that. So you would have 2 channels, personalized video, and then you could add on directing people over to like a YouTube or some of your client testimonials hosted on a landing page or whatever it may be. So again, you could use LinkedIn to go and reach out to people, put them in a sequence. Make sure you've got like a Loom video embedded in there at some stage, like a 2 or 3 minute short video explaining who you are, why you're reaching out, what value you can go and deliver for them. And then you might go and follow up with them on email. So this is just instantly, you can use automated emails. And then if they don't respond in that second follow-up, then you can go and drive them over to like your YouTube channel or show some testimonials again and again. And this is just the reverse of that. So you could start with email, go to LinkedIn, drive them over to YouTube, whatever it may be. And another really good strategy, what works all the time for some of my clients in particular, is actually so you provide value in your cold outreach. So let's just use a webinar, for example. So let's say you're company A and you're trying to reach out to company B, and your target market is someone who's company B, and you're thinking, right, okay, let's launch a webinar. And instead of reaching out to company B and saying, hey, do you want to have a sales call, which no one likes having a sales call, you can basically say to company B, hey, we're running this webinar, which is super relevant to them and it's going to help them, and it's only 30, 40 minutes or whatever. You reach out to them on cold email or on LinkedIn or on Twitter and say, hey, if you sign up to this, you're going to learn X, Y, and Z. So you get people signed up, you use email to go and reach out to them. And then you could actually go and follow up with the prospect on LinkedIn, and then you could drive them over to the webinar. And then after the webinar, you could do a separate campaign saying, I noticed you signed up for the webinar. We're offering X, Y, and Z right now. Would you be interested? And then you could go follow up with them on LinkedIn. And that crushes because you've built trust, you've given free value, and the conversion rate is a lot higher. So those are just some very quick examples of what you can do in 2026 and the reason why you should be using 3 or more channels to go and do your outreach. Now, if you do want some support and help with your lead generation, you want to set something up like this for yourself with my help, then click the link in the description and you'll be able to find out how I might be able to help you. I will see you on the next one. Peace.